Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and we have a great show for you this week. We've got two segments, another double show. First of all, Dave Michels just came back from Zoom's analyst event, Zoom Perspective. Again, this is 3 years in a row that I wasn't invited, and I got to tell you, I'm having a hard time understanding their story from a video perspective. He hopefully has a little bit better information. So we had a conversation to see if we could try and explain it to each other and figure out what's going on. And then after that, I have a conversation with Mike Brown-Cestero. He's going to be talking about the Cavlo show, which is taking place in Nashville in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned. I'm sure you'll have a great time. Joining me now is my partner, Dave Michels. Dave, what was this? You starting an earthquake the other day? Where were you?
It
What was
wasn't
going
me. It
on?
wasn't me. It was I was at the Zoom event. You know that Zoom had the CAB Customer Advisory Board and the analyst event in Half Moon Bay, California at the same time, and there was so much news and so much excitement that the earth actually shook. I mean, it's really the first event I've been to where that's actually happened.
Are
So,
you sure
uh,
it wasn't shaking just because there was a video event and I wasn't there?
well, well, there was definitely a lot of head shaking about that, but I don't think that
You
shook
don't
the
think
earth.
that caused the earthquake? Okay, so
Yeah.
so what business is Zoom in right now? What did you learn at a top level?
Well, I want to first talk about Half Moon Bay here because I last time I was in Half Moon Bay was like 40 years ago, and I had just assumed that it had turned into like some metropolis by now, but no, it's still actually kind of a little sleepy little town. The event was at this super posh hotel, and I'm always a little bit out of place at super posh places. I just don't quite fit. I never figured out how to operate the light switch in my room. I mean, it was basically it was beyond me. I mean, it was I looked everywhere. I really tried, but I could not figure out how to work the lights in my room. Um, and the other thing that's kind of particularly coming from Europe, you know, they have these gas fire pits so you can go sit outside and sit around a fire pit. Of course, the weather was kind of cool and wet, and so nobody was doing that. And to just see these gas fire pits burning, it just seems so crazy from a European perspective, where almost all the gas is imported and now being restricted because of the war in Iran. And she's like, "Oh, welcome to America. We just burn gas because it's fun." But anyway, but it was a fantastic event, and I learned a lot about Zoom. So, to your question, what is Zoom? Holy cow! You know, for the longest time, you and I knew it as a meetings company, and then of course they worked really hard, and every time we called them a meetings company, we got slapped. Don't call us a meetings company. So okay, so they were like a UCaaS company briefly, then they became a workplace company. Um, it's they're definitely changing, and I have a much better idea of where they're at right now. My assessment isn't completely done yet because I left this analyst event with about 10 hours of homework. I got to watch a bunch of videos, and so I'm still trying to put together the whole thing. But I think I'm pretty comfortable about their vision and where they're going, which is basically, you'd be surprised by this, David. Um, they're using AI. Uh, they want to reinvent the modern workplace, or they feel there's an opportunity to reinvent the modern workplace with AI. And to do that, they need to change Zoom to be an AI leader. And they made a pretty strong case, although they never really called themselves an AI leader. They made a pretty strong case that they are indeed an AI leader.
Well, it's interesting to watch it from afar and try and understand the strategy behind reinventing the company versus inventing a new company. When you reinvent a company, you run the risk of pissing off the people that brought you there to begin with. And they are definitely running that risk, not only with the people that knew them as a meetings company, but also, they've got a big ad campaign, really funny one on TV. I'm sure they talked to you guys about it, where, they're making fun of the IT people. And it's like, aren't these the people that brought you into the conference? Now, they easily could have said, here's our division that's going to be an AI company. But so did that come up, the idea that, it could have been an and not an or?
Well, I don't think I haven't seen anything where they're making fun of the IT people, but they are trying to appeal to the end user, and I think that's a decent strategy, and that's always worked for, Apple, for example. That's always worked for a lot of companies because, particularly in the enterprise space, most companies, whether it be Salesforce or um, contact center companies, or even in the meeting space, I would say Cisco, and I would say Microsoft are really targeting IT decision makers. And so I think Zoom sees a opportunity here, and they've always been kind of successful. I mean, the reason they were one of the reasons they were so successful during the pandemic was their freemium model, and people just gravitated towards Zoom. So I think that's okay to be targeting the end user, and I think that's what they're trying to do, and that's what they've always kind of done, right? And Zoom Happy is part of that. But but the but yeah, it's a crowded sector, and the basic problem with the IT crowd is that more and more of things like UCaaS, and when I say UCaaS, I'll say meetings, telephony, and chat. Um, More and more of these services are not sold or purchased. They're just bundled,
Mm.
and so if you're a Microsoft 365 customer or a Google Workplace customer, you just get these things. And so it's hard to compete against that, right? And so it's like,
Yeah.
and most companies have Microsoft or Google. So Zoom is like an extra cost in the minds of a lot of IT decision makers. And so they have to change their scope. And I think that's kind of what, in fact, it's exactly what they're doing.
Well, one more devil's advocate question, and then I want to learn more about this. But out of fairness, I have to remind you and remind everybody that when Zoom launched as a meetings company, one of their non-stated goals was to take down Microsoft. They wanted to, they were going to compete with and be better than Microsoft. And you could arguably say in a number of cases, especially around the meetings, that they were and still are better than Microsoft. But the idea of beating that kind of a giant just didn't make sense. And finally, the company adopted more of an overt strategy of where we work better combined with Microsoft.
Yeah,
And
but the thing is, I mean, I don't think they were. I don't recall what you're saying about having a goal to take down Microsoft. They may have had a goal to take down OCS. 'Cause I don't let me see. When did they
mm,
start? It was probably before, it may have been LCS. I mean, I don't. I think Zoom was around 20, and so something like that. But companies and products evolve, and Teams as was not, Teams is what I think they just celebrated a birthday. I forget what it is, 10. And no, it's not that. It can't be that. It can't be 10. Can't be 10. Maybe it is. Um, but um, but Teams is a huge market share leader. And again, it's not sold. Nobody at Microsoft sells Teams. Nobody, and as far as I know, a lot of people don't even like Teams, right? They just get it because
use it because it's there. Exactly. It's
because it's there,
ubiquitous.
exactly. And Teams has improved quite a bit. I mean, it
But
was
but
really
the
easy to sell against Teams when it was pretty early, but Teams has improved quite a bit.
the messaging that I'm talking about, which you clearly will have seen, and if you look online at Zoom, you'll see there's a lot of messaging out right now, which is how Microsoft in general, how Microsoft 365, how Office applications, how Teams, how it all works better with Zoom. That you add in the Zoom component and you get a better experience. And a
Yeah.
little bit of the strategy of what you're describing sounds to me like they're trying to compete again as opposed to blend. And
Well, they're
that's
definitely trying to compete, and that story is actually alive and well. And in fact, I was actually we'll get into this a little later, but they are playing a ambassador role. They do work well with the Microsoft environment. They do work well with other competitive environments, and I think that's an important part of their story, and an increasingly important part of their story. But what's really happening here is. And we all talk about it, but I think they're strategizing around it more than people like us who observe it. But um, we know what's going on with AI, right? And AI is changing everything. And we've already seen is what's happening in the software space. That's because where AI is having its biggest effect right now is indeed in the software development industry. And the cost of creating software has never, ever been cheaper. And we're seeing competitive barriers falling, and we're seeing companies whip up new solutions very quickly. So the cost of creating software is easy and cheap, and 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 so that has a lot of ramifications. And so what I want to get to here is that um, we're playing a different game now, and there's a bit of an opportunity here that I think Zoom is trying to seize on. Now, whenever there's a big paradigm shift, and there's only been a few in our lifetimes, really, because we go back to electricity, we can go back to the steam engine. Well, maybe that was in your lifetime, David, but in our lifetime for sure, we've seen things like the internet and even the iPhone. Um, uh, we often talk about the iPhone moment, and when these things happen, it's not the usual tech thing, which is better, faster, cheaper, et cetera, with new versions. It's everything changes, right? And particularly the vendor landscape changes. And so, but the business models change, the workflows change, everything changes. And so the most recent example for us in our industry is the iPhone and what it did to BlackBerry. But BlackBerry had a practically. Microsoft was trying to break into it, but they had their BlackBerry servers, and if you wanted to do email, and the reasons Ballmer, who's famously ridiculed the iPhone when it launched out, he was right in everything he said because he didn't realize all the rules changed, and he said, the iPhone doesn't have a keyboard. And it's not going to be great for email. It's not going to be successful in business. All that stuff was true. But he didn't realize what Apple had really invented with the iPhone. And so that's what I'm trying to get to. There's a bigger thing going on here with AI. And I think that Zoom sees this as a big opportunity and they're emboldened. They see AI as an opportunity to really make the company stronger and better, at a great opportunity. I think a lot of companies are terrified of AI and they're trying to figure out how to survive and manage it. But Zoom is actually in a really good position with this particular disruptive force because one, they have the cash. Two, they have a pretty strong brand. And it's interesting to have a strong brand without a lot of tech debt. They don't have a lot of tech debt either. They have strong leadership. They're still founder run. That kind of got the startup feel, even though they're not a startup. They've got what they call Zoom speed, which is how they refer to their agility. And they've got a pretty clear vision. And so I think they're in a pretty strong position of where they want to go. So they made a case like, that they're an AI leader. And it's like, I don't know about you. What if I'll ask you, when I say who's an AI leader, who are you going to rattle off?
Um, OpenAI, Google,
Anthropic,
Anthropic, Claude. I mean, those are the ones that I think of.
Perplexity.
Yeah,
Would you say Microsoft, by the way?
that's a good question. Microsoft
It,
just had a horrific quarter, and I'm not sure if I would at this point, because
so
Copilot changes every hour.
but that's a really interesting question because is Microsoft well, Microsoft doesn't have they partnered with OpenAI first and then they had a gap and so they had to partner with Anthropic and so it's like do they is it having the chips, is it having the models, is an LLM provider the AI leader, so it got me, their event got me thinking, what is an AI leader and is Zoom an AI leader, and I thought about it in particularly if you compare like with Microsoft. I think that you could make a pretty strong case that Zoom is an AI leader. And so they stand out because one, their federated approach, which at the time just seemed like they didn't have their own model, they didn't know what to do. But I think they've actually put enough intellectual property into making their federated model work really nicely and powerfully. And so even like Microsoft, you can either do the OpenAI stuff with their copilots, or you can do Anthropic stuff with the spreadsheets, but it's one or the other. Where Zoom is kind of figuring out where to go to with their federated model for based on your task and inquiry. They've got a pretty good what they call high time to value at Zoom, which includes adoption. And you and I have talked to a lot of people that have Copilot licenses that just don't use it. But Zoom has kind of avoided um, that pitfall because they didn't build a separate app
Hmm.
with AI Companion. They've embedded AI Companion directly into the interface that people are already using, and so they get a high adoption rate. They did make the switch to agentic from because generative AI was all about content creation and summarize this, summarize that. But they made the switch to agentic, and they've got some good agentic capabilities. And the last thing, and probably the most importantly, is it's accessible. They're bringing AI to all their users through their suite, and that includes frontline users. That includes things like the AI Studio. where people can customize it for maybe industry-specific jargon or different workflows. And so I think they've really built a pretty strong story, and they show up on some of these industry benchmarks as a front runner, and that's really right up there or above. I think they even beat Google in internet search in one of those benchmark studies. And so they've got a pretty strong case as an AI leader.
Well, you just spent, let's say, 48 hours with the executive leadership of Zoom. Having experienced that, having been to the breakout sessions, I know you didn't do the homework yet, but having been with them, what do you say is the key message that's coming? What are they saying is their key messaging to customers, to partners? What's the elevator pitch that
So,
comes off
so
of them?
the key message is AI is changing everything. So I talked about how the software industry,
Right,
but
but what's
it's
their
going to
key
just keep
message?
on it's going to keep on expanding, and basically the way we work is going to change. And they see this as an opportunity where they think they can help lead and shepherd that era into the how we work. And so it wasn't just this event because we spent some time with them at Enterprise Connect as well. And they had this tagline that they introduced at Enterprise Connect called "From Conversation to Completion." And at Enterprise Connect, I I didn't like it. I didn't get it. It's 8 syllables. Conversation to completion. I didn't even say from. And to me at the time when I heard that, that was 8 syllables to say UCAS, and I thought it was just overcomplicating things. It's like why don't you just say UCAS? But what I realize now, what they're saying after spending more time with them, is that they're not saying UCAS. They're saying UCAS is table stakes. That's where it starts. You got to have UCAS, but they really see this whole new way of working. And so, us traditionalists, again, we've been around for a little while, is that we think about work processes, and I used to have to diagram this stuff in college. You've got your inputs, you've got your functions, you've got your outputs, you've got your, all these. I remember the little stencil thing I had to draw with, and that's the way you did work processes. But in modern work and knowledge work, most of that input is coming from conversations. And that includes phone calls, emails, messages, and of course, meetings. And so these conversations are triggering the work. So from conversations to completion. So if the work starts with the conversation, then and we've known this for a while. We've been knowledge workers for a while. Um, and what's changed is you really couldn't capture those conversations. So generative AI allows us to capture those conversations. And it's not just generative AI, it's also the conversations were in silos and they take place in different formats and places. And so now they're capturing all those conversations and they're trying to make a AI assisted workflow to completion. And so you have your meeting, you have important notes that come out of it through machine generated important notes, you have action plans, uh, and you have a direction that you need to go to complete the work, and and then you start the process. And I want to say something. I want to point out something because I did not know this before either. We've had automated summaries in meetings, and pretty much all the major platforms have automated summaries. But I've never been able to capture that as part of my work process. I don't know about you, David, but it's nice when it works. But for the most part, you can't count on it because sometimes you don't host the meeting, sometimes it's on a different platform, whatever, and you can't rely on it. And so the process doesn't really work consistently. So I knew they reintroduced my notes, and I knew they made some improvements. I didn't realize is that my notes works regardless if you are the host or not. That was news to me. So now you get invited to a Zoom meeting, and you're not the host. It's running on the client side. I think that was a big change. So it runs on the client side. So now you can count on having those notes, and it even works if the meeting is on other platforms such as Teams. And if you're not on a platform and you're just in a meeting we're just meeting for coffee, then you could run my notes on your cell phone and just put it on the table and capture it that way. So they're trying to create that input to be much more reliable and
Mm.
across platform and regardless of who the host is. And so now you've got this input going into your uh, workflow. And now they've given you new tools. So at Enterprise Connect, they introduced what they call AI docs, AI slides, and AI sheets. And these are the canvases that you can massage the work and you can possibly complete it there. And if not, you can take it to a different format or a different platform. But the idea is more efficient work with AI assistance along the way. And I tend to use Google Docs as my primary word processor.
Hmm.
And one thing that's always bothered me is that Google Docs is not as good as Word. They were there first as far as a web online tool, but Microsoft has always been ahead either with Word as the software package or the Word Online, and it's always bothered me that Google never closed that gap. And one thing I really want for our insider reports is I want an index, and Google Docs just doesn't support indexing, and it just drives me crazy. So, but then I realized, but that's what Google does, right? Google is always kind of a as good as solution, good enough, I should say, a good enough solution. And Zoom isn't that. So my question, and I got kind of different answers, but my question is Zoom's AI docs, is Zoom's AI slides and AI sheets going to be a good enough type of tool? And certainly it is now in version one, or is it the vision to be a more complete, comprehensive tool? And the answer I got back was Zoom doesn't really settle for good enough in anything. They always want to raise that bar. And so the answer I got back was it might take a little bit of time, but no, they have no intention for those tools to be good enough. Um,
Well, I would criticize the entire space, not Zoom. I would criticize Microsoft. I would criticize Zoom. I would criticize all of the people in the space because what I think the development side of the people on these tools to improve workflow have lost in many cases are the users and the people. Concrete example is my wife uses Zoom for meetings with clients for the work that she does in healthcare. And she has to, for ridiculous reasons, she has to share a document for the client to sign online. And the button moved. And it not only moved to a different part on the screen, but it moved into a different part of the admin tool. So the IT managers needed to get involved. Copilot changes. I make the joke hourly, daily, weekly. Zoom is changing. I'm afraid that these companies are getting caught up in their own speed because the tools are getting so much better, but they're losing customers along the way.
I hear you. I just got an Android update, and things moved around. But the one thing that AI is doing is making software development so much cheaper. Is that the pace of change is just going to be a lot faster, at least in the near for the next couple of
Mm.
years. I don't know how you solve that one in particular, but your point is very valid, and the users are going to have some issues. Now, I just had an issue last night at 1 in the morning. And I was like, oh crap, I don't even know how to fix this. And I was quite pleased with myself. I went to an AI, I went to Google Gemini, and I said, how do I fix this? And it actually gave me a pretty quick answer. And so the good news is that while AI might be creating the problem, at least it's got a tool there to help us solve it. So
Well, that was one of the things that I would certainly point out to the team at Zoom. They've actually come up with a phrase called AI companion, but they haven't really fleshed that out to the point where it is the companion saying, "Hey, buddy, what happened to my button?" And to
I
have that
actually I think it
ongoing.
has. I think and the because AI Companion was basically there like in Docs and you can do certain things with it, but it's actually in the Zoom app now where you could actually it's just like Gemini, just like Open ChatGPT. You click on the little icon just and it's basically a chat interface. So it's actually right there now. But I want to just wrap up this thought about where I think they're going with their vision because they've got all these tools, but they're also thinking much bigger than just this basic, meeting centric environment. And so they're really trying to think about company-wide type of ways that workflow will change. And so one that includes verticals. And that's kind of low-hanging fruit because verticals have very specific workflows. But they're also so the way I've described it here with docs and slides and sheets and stuff like that and meetings, that's kind of like the what we would call UCAS or a lot of companies are calling EX now. They've also got their whole contact center stuff or the CCAS or the CX side, and they got a whole bunch of stuff going on that side. But then when you get to the company-wide stuff, it's surprising because they got the company culture side, which they're addressing with WorkVivo, and WorkVivo now has Zoom AI Companion, and it's sharing, and it's the same, and they're sharing a lot of the data and a lot of the information, and so that's becoming a part of bigger vision. But they've also done some specialized work acquisitions to address more specialized workflows. So they recently hired, we covered this in the Insider, they recently hired, acquired Brightline, which is a hiring and candidate software. I thought it was kind of like, interviewing people and scores people and all this stuff. It's not, they don't even score people. They really just track the process. And most people in a company have not been trained on how to do interviews and stuff like that. So it helps with the interviews, and so that's a company-wide service. They've also implemented, or they acquired, a company called Bonsai, and that's customer relationships type of stuff. And so really doing some good stuff there too.
Yeah, and you could see early on in Zoom, even before they were on this AI bend, the whole idea of creating a platform suite that you could do a lot of things on was one of their goals. And it looks like they're now coming full circle and now trying to create this suite of things that all kind of talk to each other and improve and change with the new workflows.
Yeah. No, I think wrap this up at this point, but I think that they're really trying to solve the implementation gap. I think a lot of people are confused. A lot of enterprises want AI and they don't know how to implement it, don't know where to implement it. I think they're solving that by making it seamless. I think they're trying to reimagine workflows and make it. Oh, they're also trying to make it more affordable, and they're trying to make it practical to the average worker. And it's even it's available on your phone, and so they're really trying to bring this to everybody in the company. So the bottom line, just wrap up with, they are reinventing workflows, reimagining workflows, and they're also reinventing and reimagining Zoom. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway.
Well, they're either way ahead of everybody else, and good for them, or they're going to struggle to catch up to the people that aren't looking at it the same way. But it's certainly an interesting
That's the risk of
gamble.
being a leader, right? You're going where no one's been before.
Absolutely. So where are you headed next, Dave?
I'm heading back to Europe, and I'll be there for a few weeks, and then back to Orlando for Microsoft 365.
You'll be at Microsoft 365. Well, I'll be at the NAB conference, and we'll catch up with everybody then. Thanks for the
Very
chat.
good.
I appreciate it. Joining me now is my friend Mike Brown-Cestero. Mike, how are you doing? Where are you today?
I am doing well. I am in beautiful Las Vegas, high of 73 today, sunny, lovely weather for April. So yeah, working. I'm off site today. I'm away from my office. I'm in somebody else's office, and they were kind enough to let me use their flex space.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Las Vegas in April. Whenever I hear that, I always think of NAB, which I will be at, but you will not, because when NAB is happening, you're going to be doing a show called cavlo, which is a show that you run in Nashville, right?
That is correct. April 22nd and 23rd will be just outside Nashville, actually, Murfreesboro, first suburb to the southwest of Nashville, at the Embassy Suites there, holding Cavlo. And Nashville's a great city for us. We love Nashville. It's a good market for us. It's been our strongest market over the years since Cavlo started back in 21. Our first Cavlo in Nashville was in 22, spring of 2022, and we've only grown since then. So we're excited to go back. We love that market.
So I was going to ask you, you almost answered it there. Why Nashville? What makes that market special, other than it being, like Music City, USA, and all the rest of the audio pieces of it? Well, why
Sure.
do you focus on Nashville?
So Nashville is one of the cities we focus on because what we are working towards is bringing trade shows to the people as opposed to making the people go to the trade show. Typically, you mentioned NAB, of course, which is in Vegas every spring. Infocom alternates between Vegas and Orlando. CES is always Vegas. And a lot of people and a lot of companies can't afford either the cost, the actual out-of-pocket cost of going to Vegas, or the lost time. That's a big one for a lot of the typically sized AV firms out there, whether they're doing production work or install work. They can't afford to send 8, 9, 10, 12 people to Vegas, but they particularly can't afford the lost time. They can't afford to basically shut their company down for a week. So if I can come to cities like Nashville, Seattle, perhaps Houston is in our future, perhaps Northern New Jersey is in our future. Perhaps Raleigh, North Carolina is in our future. Those kind of cities where there's a great, thriving, professional AV community doing great things, great installs, great production work. If we can bring a trade show to them, to where all they're looking at is perhaps losing, 3 or 4 hours on one day, 3 or 4 hours the next day, that doesn't shut a company down. That actually is an enhancement for a company. A company
Mhm.
can then afford to send everybody down to the brand new hire installation tech apprentice to go learn something, to go get maybe a Dante certification, maybe an AV over IP certification, maybe do a workshop on AV project management, like we're doing in Nashville with Murphy Daily. Those kind of things are of value to a company, and for a lot of companies, if you're talking about only Anaheim or only Vegas or only Orlando, they're just out of reach. It's just not something they can do. We want to solve that problem.
So let me take you down a tangent for a second before we come back to the conversation of cavlo and the kind of vendors or the name some of the vendors you'll have there. But um, what you're describing, which is excellent, by the way, and I've been to a few of them, and hopefully I'll be able to get a chance to go to some more, um, used to be done by Infocom. Infocom used to call them roundtables, and we used to do them in cities like that. I remember one of the best ones I ever went to was in Chicago. Again, not a small city, but not one of the big places we went to. We always had that opportunity where it was half networking and half tables, and they sort of have stopped doing that. Sort of completely stopped doing that. I don't know if you noticed that a post online a couple of days ago that well, we all know that the head of Infocom of Avixa CEO is retiring this year, and they've now started a search for his job, and the search committee is starting it between 800 and $900,000 as an annual salary. Without throwing too many rocks, is Vixa going in the right direction here, generally, without doing these local shows, having you step in to do them and looking for somebody at that level for what's supposed to be a nonprofit educational organization?
Right. So there's a couple of thoughts, and I don't think this will come to a surprise to anyone who follows me on LinkedIn. I think that position is dramatically overpaid, perhaps even grossly overpaid. If you look at other non-for-profit trade organizations that are of a similar size to Avixa, those CEOs are typically making, I haven't looked in a couple of years, so if I round up a little bit to account for inflation, they're probably making between 400, 450, maybe 500 on the outside. And if they have any kind of public facing events or education, they probably make some bonuses on top of that. So I think 800 to 900 is a little ridiculous, in my opinion. But of course, the board of directors at Avixa approves of that and the membership doesn't complain, then that's the way it's going to be. One of the challenges an organization like Avixa, and I would suspect even NAB or CES, would have in doing events like cavlo. My event is attracting between typically 30, 35 to 40 exhibitors. Our biggest show to date had 52 exhibitors. That was Nashville in 2024. Um, and this one we're looking to be right around 30 as well in a few weeks here. And this smaller show, it, a big organization is going to have trouble managing a smaller show because both the dollar volume and the dollar margins are a lot lower. And therefore, you basically have to run it internally. You can't go out and hire a GES or a Freeman or somebody like that to just take the show over and kind of run it for you. You have to do it internally. And so now you have to have operations experts and salespeople and power people who understand about distributing power, people to pick the menus, the food, right? Because we provide food on our trade show floor. All those things that a smaller company is just going to be more responsive to that. So on the one hand, I understand why a company or an organization, I should say, like Avixa, given its size and the numbers it's playing with, chooses to only do a big show. But on the other hand, it's a shame, really, because if you're talking about an organization that's supposed to be an educational organization, then you really have to, I think, in my opinion, you have to make an effort to go to where the members are, not make the members come to you. Sure, if you're talking about AVISPL or Diversified or Ford Audio Video, they have a budget every year that they set aside to make sure they send their, senior engineers, senior project managers, division managers is what they call them at Ford, or office, the head of the local or regional office, to send those folks to Infocom so they can get their education, their CTSs, see new gear, and And I'm sure those companies also have meetings around Infocom where they bring their employees in, to a
Mhm.
ballroom perhaps and do some sort of strategizing for the
Or their
upcoming.
customers, because there's the opportunity for
Yeah,
some of their customers to be in one city at the same time.
exactly, exactly. But when you look at the fact that the SCN top 50 is roughly at any given time, the SCN top 50 only represents about one, maybe 1.5% of the pro AV industry in the United States. And I base that on the fact that at any given time, the estimates are that there's between 5 and 6,000 licensed professional commercial AV integrators in the United States. Therefore, 50 would be roughly 1%. Um,
And
but
AVISPL and CTI and some of the other bigger companies, they're buying like one a week, right? Or one every other week.
exactly, exactly. So when you start saying, and again, listen, I understand why a manufacturer would want to focus on those, right? If you could get a company like Diversified or AVISPL to standardize on your, whatever, your camera or your ceiling speaker, that's a lot of cameras that one company's going to buy. But it's a shame that the other 99% of the industry is getting left out of this
Mhm.
experience, right?
Okay.
So, it's hard to say. I don't know what I would necessarily do or could do differently were I in David Labuskas's position. But man, I'd certainly try to get it to more of the people because it would be good if we leveled up the industry a little bit.
Well, the local outreach is important, which you're doing, and I think that's key. Education is important, which you're also doing, but education shouldn't be the opportunity to sell certifications to your members. Education should include advocacy. How am I going to get the rest of the world, the architects, the general contractors, the building real estate people, how do I get them to understand the importance of my certification? So as
Yeah.
opposed to me making money selling you my certs, I'd rather be supporting my members by educating other people as to why they're important.
Yeah, no, and I think that, I remember a time about 20 years ago when I got, maybe not quite 20, when I got my CTS and shortly after my CTS-I, at least here locally in Las Vegas, there were several architects that I'd run into on projects that we were interested in that knew what a CTS was, and they were looking for AV companies that had CTS folks in them. Clark County, which is the county that Las Vegas is located in, decent sized county. I think our school district is the fifth or sixth largest school district in the U.S., so it's a decent sized county. In their specifications for any kind of AV project, it said you had to have on the installation side, you had to have a CTS-I on staff. Actually, had to be an employee, or else you didn't qualify to bid. And there came a time where that got dropped, which is a shame because a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into getting their CTSD and CTS-I, and I still think it's a great source of pride for people, and I think it's a great learning opportunity for people. The CTS program is strong. It's just unfortunately outside of our industry, fewer and fewer and fewer people know about it, know what it means, understand the value of it. I would think if ideally a certification program should sell itself. If an organization like Avixa has a certification program, like they do, and it was being promoted outside of our industry to general contractors and architects and consulting firms and large purchasing institutions like the counties and the cities and the municipalities and the big school districts and your higher ed market, if it was being promoted to those folks, you wouldn't have to promote the certification to your members. Your members would be clamoring for the education and for the certification because they would need it because their customers are asking for them to have it. Um,
That's the piece that's missing. Exactly.
and that's where it got a little topsy-turvy. And listen, David Labuska's coming out of COVID, did an interview, and if I recall correctly, he said that Infocom is 93% of Avixa's revenue. So I understand if something is 93% of your revenue, you need to focus on it. It's important, right? If that's what's paying the bills. Does that mean you need to focus on it exclusively, perhaps to the detriment of your other opportunities? I would say
Six,
no.
seven, chicken and egg, 6, 7. Is it that much of your revenue because are you focusing on it because of it, or is it that much of your revenue because that's all you're working on and you haven't really bothered doing? I mean, it's It's a much larger debate than just for you and I today, but these are all things that hopefully will be looked at as the board starts their search. And I could think of taking that salary that they've advertised, publicly, and maybe cutting it in thirds and hiring somebody for a third, and then using the other third for education and another third for advocacy, and a better spend of money for a nonprofit. So, but
And I will say I am encouraged. They recently hired Jennifer Weaver, and her position is, and forgive me, I don't know the exact title, but her job is member outreach, essentially, to go out and get feedback from members, including traveling around and hitting some of the smaller events, some of the rep organized events, some of the dealer organized events. And I hope she does that, and I hope they give her a little bit of free rein to travel and actually meet with people face to face, because I think any organization in any field, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, you can't just be open to feedback. You have to be a demand for feedback. You have to actually go out and ask people
mm,
the pointed questions. And if you think people aren't telling you the truth, because they're just trying to be polite, or let me be professional about this. You don't say things I'm unhappy with when you're a professional. If you think organizations aren't, your customers, whomever they may be, are not being 100% forthright with you, then hire a third party. Find a way to do an anonymous request for feedback. And make sure, we've done this before with cavlo, where we've sent exhibitors a link to a survey. The survey gets filled out. I have no idea by whom. If we send it to, say, 100 exhibitors, and 48 of them respond to it, I don't know what 48. I just know that 48 out of 100 responded. And certainly we have some specific questions that we've asked, but we also at the end always leave a spot where comments, any comments for us. I think we capped it at 1,000 characters, but that's still a pretty, or 1,000 characters, 1,000 words. Sorry, that's still a pretty good amount of
sure.
space. And of course, everybody has my email address, and everybody can find me on LinkedIn and whatnot. So if anybody had anything else to tell me or to add to that, they could certainly reach out to me. But we've learned a lot from those surveys, and I would hope that Avixa would take an opportunity to do something like that, so that they can listen. It's a solid organization. It's full of great people, but little by little and more, I am noticing that the biggest cheerleaders for the pro AVL market are the people in the pro AVL market. Outside the pro AVL market, you're not going to find too many people who are aware of us, aware of what we do, the importance of what we do.
And that's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. And I was talking just yesterday, I was talking to a low voltage contractor here in town about the difference between, and they primarily do traditional low voltage. So that's going to be a lot of networking, data drops, that sort of thing. And I said, well, we were talking about the differences, and I said, well, listen, if in some cases for you, it's very simple. If you have a 22 drop office location, then you need a 24 port switch. The client can't come to you and say, I want to save some money by putting a 16 port switch in. You have 22 drops. You need at least 22 drops plus another one for the uplink. So you need a 24 port switch. It's just that simple. In the AV world, everything changes every year dramatically, and not just improvements to the gear, but also standards. There's 2 or 3 video standards you have to be aware of at any time. At the moment, there's probably 2 audio transport protocols you really need to know about, but there's another 3 that you should know about.
Mhm.
If you're doing lighting, then you have to understand DMX and ArtNet. These are all things. It's like that old joke about who should charge more, your doctor or your mechanic? Most people would say doctor, and the mechanic's like, what are you talking about? The human body hasn't changed in 100,000 years. Doctors are pretty much working on the same thing year after year. Every year we have new makes and models and new technologies. So it's a little bit like that in AV. I think,
Sure,
everything is
absolutely.
changing all the time, and you just got to stay on top of it. And I don't think a lot of the fellow professionals that we work with outside of the pro AV world understand that.
So if I'm well, while I'm in Las Vegas for NAB, and my partner Dave Michels is in Orlando for the Microsoft 365 conference, new thing that's happening that Microsoft's participating this year. It's not new, but newly participating. And you are in Nashville. What's the experience going to be like for the local people in the Nashville area? What kind of vendors do you have? What kind of experiences? What's the lounge like? What's the
Well,
education like?
yeah,
Give us
and
give us a 5-minute snapshot of that.
Yeah, and I'd like to say regional, really, because we already have some folks coming from Kentucky, we have some folks coming from Alabama, we have some folks coming from Georgia. Um, our show 2 years ago, we had people from as far away as Florida and Illinois also come. I'm not sure if they're coming this time, I haven't noticed, but of course they're welcome. Everyone's welcome as long as you're 18 over and you're in the professional audio, video, and lighting world, whether that's on the production side or on the install side. It's free to attend. We've changed the format a little bit this year. We used to be just a strictly 1 day show, and now the show opens up. The show floor opens up on 4 o'clock at 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the 22nd, and we will have our welcome reception, which is always the evening of day one. We'll have that on the show floor this year for the first time, and that way folks don't have to wander around from one part of the venue to another part of the venue. It's just right there on the show floor, super easy. And that'll give the exhibitors a little more face time as well in front of their booth if that's what they want to do. So 4 to 7 will be the show floor on Wednesday the 22nd. Thursday the 23rd. Show floor will reopen at 9 a.m. and close at 4 p.m. And throughout that time, of course, we'll have breakout sessions, and some of them are for CTS RUs, AV over IP, USB, which, people laugh when I talk about doing a class on USB, but really the intricacies of USB and why sometimes it works and doesn't work, and things you need to know about USB to make, for example, if you're on the install side and you're doing meeting rooms, it's a big deal. USB matters, right?
Hmm.
We have a great workshop by Murphy Daly, I mentioned. She has her book out now on being a project manager in the AV world. So she's going to do a workshop on that, as well as have her book there. If anybody wants to get it autographed by the author herself, that'd be great. Erica Carroll, this is our first for us. We're doing an exhibitor-only workshop on the morning of day 2, led by Erica Carroll, where she'll be helping exhibitors understand the things they need to do to get their training programs certified for RUs and how they need to package that training course, and what they have to offer, and those sort of things. So it then becomes an RU ready course. Of course, we always have free snacks. I'm a big fan of free snacks. So we'll have those on the show floor all day long. And of course, guess cavlo. If somebody can guess what CAVLO stands for, it is an anagram. Then they might win $2,000 cash.
And you've almost given away that answer during our conversation today.
Almost. Almost. And there's some t-shirts floating around too that'll get, if people are paying attention, especially to LinkedIn over the next week or two, they should see the A, the V, and the L in posts for t-shirts that we've sent out.
And I have posted the shirt you sent me with the V on it, and I've actually used that picture. Now, I just finished my Infocom presentation, so it will actually be in my Infocom presentation.
Oh,
So
very
I'm
nice.
putting it on my bio slide. So
Very nice.
two more questions then, and I'll let you go. One, because I know you're at a job site and courtesy of your client. One is, so when Nashville is over, where are you next? What's the next story this year?
All right, so we have two sized events now. That's another thing that's changed with cavlo in the last couple of years. We have a smaller event, a 3 hour happy hour type of event that we do in some markets, particularly when we're just trying to see what the temperature is like in that market, right? See if there are, because you can look on paper or on social media and say to yourself, "Oh my gosh, there sure are a lot of AV people in such and such a market," but you don't really know if they're the type that will come out to an event, if they're interested in doing an event, participating in an event, attending a cavlo. So our smaller event called Cavlo Connects, we'll be having one of those the evening of July 2nd in Jersey City at the Hyatt Grand Marquis, right there on the Hudson, overlooking beautiful downtown Manhattan, and just in time for the holiday weekend too. So that should be nice. And then coming up in October, the 21st and 22nd, we'll be back in Seattle for a full tech expo. That's our 2 day trade show event with, like I just described, for Nashville. And we might have one more Connects this year in the Houston area. I haven't decided on that yet, but a couple of people from that market have called and asked if we could do that, or actually emailed, I should say. So we're looking at that. So I would say for sure, Jersey City is a for sure on July 2nd, and cavlo Tech Expo Seattle, October 21st and 22nd. That's a for sure. And then the Houston's a strong maybe.
And you might even have me show up in Jersey City, considering it's just a quickie car or train ride away.
Oh, that'd be lovely. We'd love to have you.
Don't have anything on the second. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days after my birthday, so that might
Oh, look
be
at that. I'll
cool.
buy you a cake.
We'll have a Danto cake. All right, and then I said the second question is the logistics one more time for Nashville. Where, when, how, why? What do I have to do to register?
Well, if you want to register to attend, simply go to cavlo.tech and look at the top, and it'll say attend. Click on that link, click on the Cavlo logo, and away you go. It'll take you to our offsite. We have a third party that manages our registrations for us, because that's actually a decent sized lift for all the stuff that happens in the background. Just answer all the questions, and that's it. That's all it takes. You'll get a confirmation email with a QR code, and when you come in on the 22nd. We will scan that QR code, give you a badge, and Bob's your uncle. You're in Cavlo.
So it's April 22nd. We're in Nashville?
At the Embassy Suites in Murfreesboro.
Murfreesboro.
Yep, Murfreesboro. And that would be, we start on the 22nd at 4 o'clock, and that's till 7. And then on the 23rd, we're 9 to 4.
Mike, I look forward to seeing you again the next time you and I are in the same city. But until then, have a wonderful show in Nashville. And
Thank you.
thanks very much for all the information.
Absolutely. Next stake's on me. Have a good one.
That's it for this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Take care.